Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. I'm Abby Brinker. I'm here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the Mothman.
The Mothman.
And to be honest, I'm a little concerned about this.
Why?
Because the lore of this is so rich and dense, and there's a lot of people who are really in the weeds on it. And I've learned from taking on the research how sort of non-linear it is. So I'm going to do my best to, what I think the position this podcast is taking on the Mothman is trying to present it in a palatable, accessible way. Because you can certainly, do like a 5-part series on it. Like that's how dense it could be. But we're going to really try to go through it in a way that makes it palatable for everyone, even if you're not super knowledgeable about all of these kind of different cryptids and mythological things that we're going to get into, and UFOs.
Okay, so the Mothman.
The Mothman.
I have zero familiarity with this outside of the movie, The Mothman Prophecies. That was a doozy of a movie.
And you hadn't seen that before.
I had.
Oh, you had?
Yes, I had watched it. I don't know, when the movie came out?
2002. Okay,
so I probably saw it early 2000s. In a home movie situation. Once it was on DVD, okay. I was all about it. I did not see this in theaters.
Gotcha. I had seen it several times. My family, again, big on horror films. We had watched it a few times background when it came out, and a few times since. I would say I think it holds up pretty well from being from 2002. B, again, this is going to be a wild, wild ride. And I think watching that movie does a lot to set the groundwork for what the real events that took place. Like, it is fictionalized, but there is a lot of,
real accounts
in the movie. And so I think it's helpful kind of as like a first step to understanding the Mothman.
So when I first saw it, I remember thinking, this is a stupid movie.
Really? I thought it was so scary.
I just remember, I remember seeing it and being like, not understanding it at all.
Sure.
But that's fair. And then, so this time around, I watched again with a good friend. And we both, because he was in the same boat. He had seen it many years ago and he remembers it was just kind of weird and scary.
Okay.
And we watched it together. And and afterwards, we're just like, we feel bad. That was like a really unsettling thing to see.
Yeah.
A lot of pieces kind of clicked into place.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into it later.
We will.
But this is not a creature feature at all.
No. It's so much more.
It's not even a horror film.
No, I agree. And it's once we talk about all of these accounts and things that, again, are real, I think there's a lot of weight to that film, actually.
What's a better term for a real account? Because, we're not saying that this actually happened, but we're saying that these are real.
It was inspired by true reports. Reports. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, these are reports that actually exist.
Right. Like, we weren't there. We didn't live through this time, so we couldn't say whether or not this happened for sure, but I have my theories.
Okay. Well, I have my theories, too.
Well, you haven't even heard the research yet.
You know what? Maybe I did my own research.
I doubt it. Did you?
No.
All right. Let's get into it. Buckle up, everyone, because, again, non-linear here, so bear with me. I tried my best to organize this in a way that made sense. Local folklore and cryptid mythology spans across the United States and the globe. Today we are talking about the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, specifically.
Wait, that was the place in the movie.
Yeah. But we're talking about so much more than that. We are really going to get into some interesting things. If you visit the small Appalachian town today, you'll find a small tourism industry that's been created around the legend of the Mothman, including a statue of the creature in the center of the town, museums, and gift shops. But was the Mothman actually an unexplainable paranormal creature, or did hysteria amplify sightings of rare birds in the area?
Rare.
It certainly wasn't rare birds. Spoiler alert. It was not.
I swear, if this is a second monster that boils down to magpies.
No, it's not. But I will say there is some interesting connections between the blob story and some of the stuff we're going to get into today, which I'll call out as we go.
Okay.
And I didn't do, kind of chronicle all of this in the research, but there are throughout, again, like the last 100 years, even within just the United States alone, but looking globally, there are so many reported sightings of different birdmen type creatures, even in Brooklyn, New York in like the late 1800s. For 3 years, there was this, people over Coney Island over the beach would see this like birdman, and there was like hundreds of accounts of it. And across, in India and all these different places. And so we're not going to get into like that, but it sounds silly, but it actually is like, does. There's a huge history of reportings of things like this. So
the vast majority of paranormal sightings in general went away once people started carrying camera phones.
I guess we're done here. I guess you've debunked it, Alan. I guess you've sucked all the fun out of the episode.
If you would like to like and subscribe.
No, stop it. Today's sources. Good old friend Wikipedia. We have Mothman, America's Notorious Winged Monster, which is a Monstrum video. Last podcast on the left series, The Men in Black. An article from allthingsinteresting.com. A documentary called The Mothman of Point Pleasant, which you can watch on Amazon Prime for free if you're a Prime member. This is not an endorsement for Amazon. Cryptid Wiki by fandom.com, and the Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel, which is a nonfiction book that just happens to have the same name of the film that was inspired by the events.
Also, the great essay, Mothman, Man or Moth?
By Alan Kudan. How long were you sitting there thinking of that one?
I don't know. Well, not too long.
On November 1st, 1966, there were National Guard troops stationed outside a local wildlife preserve that claimed to see a man-bird in the trees. 2 weeks later, there were similar sightings 80 miles away in West Virginia. On November 12th, 1966, in Clendenin, West Virginia, 5 gravediggers were at work when they looked up to see what they described as a man with wings soaring in the sky over them. They claimed to have eyes on this figure for about a minute before it disappeared behind the surrounding trees. On November 15th, 1966, in the TNT district of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, 4 adults, 2 young married couples, Linda and Roger Scarberry and Mary and Steve Millette, reported to police that they encountered a large creature standing in the middle of the road. According to these witnesses, it was large and gray, and its eyes glowed red when the headlights flashed over it. Steve Millette claimed the figure was almost 7 feet tall, with a 10-foot wingspan and red eyes. Linda Scarberry said she couldn't see a head or arms, but saw the glowing red eyes, and that the figure shied away from lights.
Well, it's not the moth then.
Well, it's the Mothman.
Yeah, but, I mean, you know where I'm going with this.
Because moths love light.
They love light.
I don't think that's going to be the...
That's strike one.
They sped away, but soon spotted the creature again. This time it was following them. According to the group, they accelerated to over 100 miles per hour, but were unable to lose the creature pursuing them. And this is like a really pinnacle sighting. This is kind of like what kicks things off.
Okay.
So there's 4 young adults, right? 2 married couples in this hot rod kind of car. The kind of rumors are they were out like street racing kind of a thing.
Sure.
They come upon in the middle of the road this very bizarre looking creature, super tall, big wingspan, right? Red eyes.
Sure.
They try to speed away. They're going up to 100 miles per hour. And the figure takes off in flight and is pursuing them, and they can't shake it. They grew super afraid that they were going to crash the car because of the high speeds. And the creature seemed to chase them from town and pull back after they crossed out of the city limits.
Aha! It has a jurisdiction.
Well, not always. The length of the road where this chase happened was actually a local drag strip, and Roger Scarberry, the driver, was used to drag racing along the road in his 57 Chevy. Still, they were unable to shake the creature from their tail, right? So this was like an experienced driver who was comfortable driving quickly, had a great hot rod kind of car. Mm-hmm. Still, this creature was, was a total match for it. It was getting them good, yeah. I also want to take a second. This is a little bit of like homeworky, but I want to take a second to talk about the TNT area because it's going to come up a lot today.
What do you mean by TNT area?
Well, I'm going to tell you. The McClintock Wildlife Management Area, also known as the TNT area, is about 5 miles north of Point Pleasant proper.
The PPP.
I actually call it PP in the outline a lot because it's so many. I say it so many times. Though it's now a nature preserve, it was originally the home of West Virginia Ordnance Works, a $45 million manufacturing facility that spread across 8 acres.
By ordnance, do you mean like weaponry?
It was in operation from 1942 to 45, but was abandoned after the end of World War II.
Exactly,
So,
it's making munitions.
Weaponry, yeah. Then it became a dumping field for toxic waste before taking its final form as a nature preserve.
Oh, geez. So an old weapons manufacturing facility turns into a toxic waste dump, and then they reintroduce animals, and they wonder why they made a fucking Mothman.
Of course, it became the local haunt for teens to drag race and neck. I also want to call out, this is 1966. So most of what happens that we're going to talk about is between 1966 and 1967.
Okay.
So it's not that long after like the time frame of the Blob and those sightings, which was, 50s.
No, the blob sightings continued all the way through the 90s and onwards.
I know, just saying, the beginning of it. The week after Steve, Roger, Linda, and Mary saw the creature, other people in the area started to report similar sightings, including 2 volunteer firemen who described it as a huge flying bird with red glowing eyes. All witnesses claimed that the creature was clumsy at moving on the ground, but flew incredibly fast, again up to 100 miles per hour. Armed locals started looking in the TNT area for the monster, so much so that police had to get involved to deter people from canvassing the area with weapons. Things started to get even weirder when Newell Patridge, a local to Salem, West Virginia, claimed to see weird patterns on his television one night. Shortly after, he heard a bizarre sound outside his house. Patridge took a flashlight outside to investigate, only to find 2 red glowing eyes reflecting back at him. Unfortunately, he also believes the creature is responsible for the disappearance of his dog.
Oh.
There were, of course, initial theories at the time.
Do you know what they are?
I'm about to tell you. Do you have initial theories?
Anytime you have something that's like a large creature, right? Stories always get exaggerated. I'm trying to think of what would cause eyes to be red. Like what animal in nature would eyes glow red from light?
Mm-hmm. Well, here, there's a sighting we're going to get to later, but I'm going to spoil it now because it's relevant. At one point later, somebody sees the Mothman, what they assume to be the Mothman, on the roof of this abandoned factory in the TNT area. Mm-hmm. And they see from the roof that the eyes are glowing red.
Okay.
Right? Inside, they later encounter it inside, and the eyes don't glow because there's nothing for it to reflect off of. So they determined it's not that it was glowing, it's that it was reflective.
Yeah, so, that's kind of what I was getting at. But cat's eyes don't, they glow when the light catches it.
Right.
I'm just
like my security camera when I look at James.
Exactly. It's because it's bouncing off the infrared light.
Yeah.
So that's why their eyes are shaped like that, to reflect light, so they can have better night vision.
Right.
I can't think of an animal in nature that with eyes reflect red, but it must exist.
Well, or it's a cryptid. So here are the initial theories at the time. Local law enforcement, Mason County Sheriff George Johnson, attributed the sightings to a large heron that he called a shikepoke. Wildlife biologist Robert L. Smith from West Virginia University reviewed the claims and determined that they could be describing the sandhill crane. It's a large American bird, which can be as large as a human, with a 7-foot wingspan and reddish coloration around the eyes. Some believe that it was a bird that was mutated by the chemicals in the TNT area. Witnesses agreed, though, that the creature didn't look disfigured or mutated. It looked like it had grown up, what am I trying to say? Very much on purpose. Like how it was as it intended to be.
Oh, intelligent design. I just did a quick Google.
Yeah.
The number 2 hits for animals with glowing red eyes.
Yeah.
Or eyes that reflect back, yes. Rabbits, which we can probably rule out.
Yeah.
And owls. Some owls get really big.
12 feet tall?
You add in a little bit of toxic waste dump,
Sure.
And you get giant mutant owl.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's your theory.
This is not at all my theory. I'm just trying to give some
scientific evidence.
So like if we're still on team this is a weird animal, or this is a physical animal, which I don't think this was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this thing ever actually existed in the way that like a creature would be here all the time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't think this is just like some monster that would just like sleep during the day and come out at night.
Right.
I think there's much more to it than that. But if we're still on team, this is a big owl.
Right.
Well,
Then
that's our leading theory right now.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll see if we can debunk it.
You have to understand, and this is where there's going to be a few, I know I've said this, but there's going to be a few little side tangent journeys that we go on together as we explore the Mothman. Mm-hmm. This is the first. You have to understand the history of Point Pleasant to really fully understand the climate of the time that the Mothman sighting started. All the way back, Native American tribes were said to avoid the land of Point Pleasant, where it is now, because of curses or bad omens that they believed were abundant on lands where multiple water sources existed. So in this case, where rivers meet. So anywhere where they had like a saying, like where waters mingle, that sort of thing. It was meant to be like bad luck.
Interesting.
Native Americans also suffered and were killed trying to defend their land from colonizers during the Battle of Point Pleasant. The Native Americans were outnumbered and retreated. The Shawnee chief, who is named Chief Cornstalk, tried to come forward and approach the colonizers and negotiate a treaty.
Sure.
But he and his son, some cases say son, some say sons, but he and his sons were brutally captured and murdered by the invaders.
Of course they were.
The legend goes that his final words were a 200-year curse on the town of Point Pleasant.
Oh, you don't want to mess with that.
No.
So now we have cursed burial ground.
Yep.
Abandoned weapons facility, toxic waste dump.
And it just keeps getting... just wait. This is the tip of the iceberg.
Oh,
still.
My goodness.
Though there is no way to know if Chief Cornstalk actually cursed the town, local historians have found that the townspeople perpetuated and escalated this rumor, passing the legend down orally to generations. The town even turned it into a play in 1923.
It's called Chicago.
It doesn't help that the town of Point Pleasant did come to endure a string of bad luck. 4 times between 1913 and 1937, the Ohio River Valley flooded and caused terrible damage and killed a lot of people. Mm. Okay, here's our second little side path here.
Okay.
In the early 20th century, rumors of a Birdman started to circulate. And this was totally news to me in the research. I had not even heard about this before. Mm-hmm. The really strange and unsettling thing about this is that these stories predate the Mothman incidents by about 50 years. Locals describe the creature as a winged man with a wingspan of 12 feet. Many describe him as being covered with dark and red feathers.
I think that answers my question. So I just find it very interesting that these accounts jump to Birdman as opposed to like, this is an angel, or this is some kind of other established winged humanoid thing from, mythology.
It is interesting. That's actually a good point. And I wonder, like, psychologically, if you saw this, if it's easier mentally to believe it's an angel, or if it's easier mentally to believe it's a Birdman. I don't know. I don't know, like, what the psychology of it is. But that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. A lot of the fantasy novels that I read, there's lots of man or like humanoid creatures with wings, like winged men and women. And they're based in like fae and other kind of established things. But I didn't even think about that. They're not like, oh man, that's got to be a Scottish fae. They're like, oh, it's a Birdman. Yeah. There's another local legend that we would be fools to omit here.
You wrote that down verbatim, didn't you? Okay. That's
yes. 1, because it's relevant to the Mothman, and 2, because it's exactly how the film The Blob starts, which is truly just a bizarre coincidence. The Flatwoods Monster of West Virginia was originally sighted on September 12, 1952. Fred and Edward May, brothers, and their friend Tommy Heyer reported seeing a bright object fall across the sky and land in a local farm belonging to G. Bailey Fisher. The boys gathered their mother and some other kids to return to the farm and search. Again, very similar to the plot of The Blob. Mm-hmm. As the group came to the top of the hill, one of the boys claimed to see a pulsing red light, After pointing a flashlight in the direction of the light, the boy claimed to see a man-like figure with a round red face surrounded by a pointed hood-like shape.
Round red face with pointed hood-like shape.
That's a quote.
Okay, I'm just trying to picture that.
Okay, I think this one is going to give you, this description is going to give you the mental image. Kathleen May described the figure as having small, claw-like hands, clothing like folds, and a head that resembled the ace of spades. So it's almost the silhouette of the Queen of Hearts, this like sharp.
Yeah.
And like when you look it up, there's lots of imagery of it, and it's like this very distinct.
But no mention of wings.
No. The boy holding the flashlight screamed and ran away, which caused the entire group to do the same. The group also claimed to have experienced a mist and a putrid smell and felt sick to their stomachs. Local law enforcement investigated the next day and discovered nothing. No smells, no mist, no glowing lights. However, the kids returned to the scene of the crime to find skid marks in a jelly, which caused the UFO community to label this incident as a UFO landing.
No.
And also jelly, hello.
Magpies.
And again, still, we're like weirdly on theme with the blob here, right?
Yeah. Well, what was it? Amphibious jelly?
It was spawn jelly.
Yeah, amphibian spawn jelly.
So again, I'm not going to go too much into the Flatwoods Monster here because it could have its own episode and it deserves more airtime on a separate day.
Flatwoods? What?
It's called the Flatwoods Monster, this incident.
This incident?
Yeah.
Because it's not the Mothman.
No, it's separate. But this happens in the area. So what I'm doing right now is demonstrating like the rich sort of history of cryptid and UFO sightings that are specific to this area.
Sure.
Because I think it's important for painting the whole picture here. I'm not making the argument that the Mothman sightings did or did not actually happen. I tend to err on the side of believing in some version of these sort of things. That being said, I wanted to give context around the history of the town. We have a town where locals in the very early days believed that they were cursed for stealing land away from the Native Americans. We have a town that was hit with extreme weather, flooding, and loss. We have a town that has a history of UFO sightings and cryptid legend, the Birdman, the Flatwoods case, injured cold, which I'm about to get into, and most famously, the Mothman. If anything, it could also be said that there's some sort of supernatural portal here, right?
Mm-hmm. That's well, we'll get to that.
So either way, we can get back on track here, but I wanted to sort of, give the periphery of what's going on.
Sure.
I also want to quickly mention that we're going to have a conversation with John C. Cook from the Fido podcast, because our friend John is very local to this area. And so he's had some experiences and we've had some initial conversations about it. So as a follow-up to this, we're going to have a conversation with John about his local experiences. Because I also, this is a very specific town and I don't live there and I've never been there. And I want to make sure we have some local representation as well.
Is now a good time to mention that we're recording this in the town right now?
We are not. We're recording it in New York. Here's where things kick it up to the next level. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
And if you, Alan, you've seen the Mothman Prophecies and anyone else who has seen it.
I have seen the film.
I want to see if you recognize this name.
Injured Cold.
Injured Cold.
Hell yeah. I mean, he's a main character.
Injured Cold or the Smiling Man.
Oh, Smiles.
So the cherry on top, in my opinion, of this whole case is Injured Cold. There are 3 major sightings of him. And there's more, but there's sort of 3 that I'm going to talk about here. The first, 2 boys, Martin and James, claimed to see a smiling man in a green metal suit as they walked home late one night in New Jersey.
Green metal suit?
Mm-hmm. It was the evening of October 12th, 1966. So the same fall, right, where the Mothman sightings are happening, but this is in New Jersey.
Okay. These
2 young boys are walking home. It's late at night. I think one says to the other, like, who's that guy over there by the fence?
Smiling with a green metal suit.
And they turn, and this very creepy guy is kind of like coming through the fence towards them.
When you say metal suit, are we talking about just like an Armani suit made of metal?
No.
Or like a knight in shining armor?
I think we're talking more about like almost like a spacesuit.
Okay. Got it.
But I'm just interpreting the information I'm giving.
I think we're all interpreting this quite differently.
The boys described him as a tall, bald man standing near a fence. The most unsettling part was his huge grin that was spread across his face. Later, they recalled that he didn't have ears or a nose. He chased the boys, but they were able to get away. Important to note that there were UFO sightings around that time in this area.
That tracks.
The second sighting came less than a month later on November 2nd, 1966. So now we're really in the same time frame as the Mothman. But this is in Parkersburg, West Virginia. So again, now we're in West Virginia. Woodrow Durenberg was driving on Interstate 77 when he heard a loud crash. Seconds later, a strange craft seemed to land in front of him on the road. He later describes it as an old-fashioned kerosene, this is quoting, an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck, then enlarging in a great bulge at the center. Next, a man with a huge smile emerges from the craft and stands in front of Derenberger's car. The figure speaks to Derenberger telepathically. And also, you can listen to interviews with Derenberger about the incident, like on YouTube. You can find them.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Derenberger claims that the figure said his name was Indrid Cold. He told him he did not want to hurt him. He was only here to learn more about humankind. Derenberger also recalls that Cold claimed to be from planet Lanalis in the galaxy of Ganymedes, which he goes on to claim later that he was taken in a UFO to Lanalis, and he goes on to write a book with Alan Colvin called Visitors from Lanalis. So I think it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. He got a lot of media, like national media attention for this sighting, kind of, then goes on to write a book and claims like extra things, which, take
Sure.
with a grain of salt, because once you get media attention in your blood, but who knows? Either way, this is sort of the pinnacle Indrid Cold sighting.
Okay.
The third sighting, though, is very interesting to us because it happens in Point Pleasant. In 1966, the Lilly family had reported poltergeist activity in their house. Of course, because literally Point Pleasant is like Night Vale. Like, it's like this crazy town where everything is going on. Have you ever listened to the podcast Welcome to Night Vale?
No.
Oh, it's like,
I don't really like podcasts.
I like Welcome to Night Vale. It's been around for a really long time, and it's sort of this fictionalized town where everything is just like paranormal and crazy.
Like Jollyville.
Yeah, like Jollyville, but paranormal and crazy. The daughter of the Lilly family, Linda, wakes up one night to see a man standing over her. And this is a quote from the daughter. It was a man, a big man, very broad. I couldn't see his face well, but I could see that he was grinning at me. He walked around the bed and stood right over me. I screamed again and hid under the covers. When I looked again, he was gone.
Well, that solves it. And were accounts of Indrid Cold already available at this time?
So these all happened within like 2 weeks of each other.
Interesting. In
New Jersey, a different town of West Virginia, and then finally in Point Pleasant. And they all happened within 2 weeks of the Mothman sightings. Like the first Mothman sightings.
Okay.
So in the film, right, the Mothman Prophecies, which is fictionalized, but Indrid Cold is actually the name of the demonic kind of otherworldly type character that seems to be causing the chaos and issuing the warnings. But we'll get to the film later. One more point here. There's a correlation between the Indrid Cold sightings and UFO sightings in each of these areas. So believe what you want, but that is going to come into play later as well. Things are really going to crescendo here. Shall we get back to the Mothman?
Please.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience on these.
So Indrid Cold is not the Mothman.
I mean, listen, I can't answer that question, but the Indrid Cold sightings that I just kind of quoted are distinctly different from the Mothman sightings because Indrid Cold appears as a human man,
right,
and the Mothman appears as a moth. So could they be connected? I think the point is that people think that they are, but I don't know how they're connected, right? Or if there is a shapeshifter in our midst. Like, I don't know how it interplays. Before we continue with our exploration of the Mothman sightings of Point Pleasant,
we're going to stop the episode.
We need to take a moment to recap where we are since we've covered so much.
We're in Point Pleasant. I'm following.
The year is 1966, and locals in Point Pleasant and the surrounding area start to have independent sightings of a large, somewhat humanoid creature with glowing eyes and huge wings. And when I say humanoid, like, it doesn't look like a man in like his face or anything like that, but it sort of like stands tall.
It's bipedal.
Bipedal. Thank you.
But, bears look bipedal too.
It's true, but they don't.
You ever seen pictures of bears
fly.
walking around on 2 feet, on 2 legs?
Pictures of them?
Well, videos.
No.
It's so creepy.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they look just like a person in a bear costume.
That's weird.
Like, they walk so well on 2 legs.
Huh. Do they do it often? Oh, we're getting a live example here. I love this kind of episode. Okay, I can now confirm how truly bizarre it looks when a bear walks. It looks like exactly like you said. It looks like a human pretending to be a bear.
Yeah, well.
It's very silly and goofy and creepy. Everyone watch it.
Now, just imagine it's nighttime and a bear walks up to you like that.
Just casually strolls.
Just casually walks past you. What would you think? Would you think you just saw a bear? Would you just think you just saw a freaking Sasquatch? The mind is going to jump to something supernatural.
Probably, yeah. Especially my mind. I would always think it's supernatural. From Point Pleasant to Charleston, there was an influx of UFO sightings at this time. The newspaper even had to create a special assignment desk for all of the UFO calls that were coming in. There seems to be a correlation between nights the Mothman was seen and these sightings. They often also happen locally, often in the TNT area. The documentary, The Mothman of Point Pleasant, includes first-hand accounts and interviews with some of the folks who had seen UFO activity in this area. The North Power Plant inside the TNT area was also a hot spot for Mothman sightings. Bob Bobsworth was out with his friend, and this is the story that I was referencing earlier.
Of course his name is Bob. Bob Bobsworth.
Bob Bobsworth.
Bob Bobsworth definitely owns a pickup truck.
Well, he owns a motorcycle.
Didn't see that coming.
He was out with his friend riding motorcycles one night when they decided to ride through the TNT area. They saw glowing red lights on top of the North Power Plant. They decided to go and see who it was. They stopped at the entrance of the building and kind of looked up, right? And it looked like eyes were looking down at them, so they went inside. As they approached through this dark, abandoned sort of factory type building, they could see the outline up ahead of something in the dark walking towards them. And again, no lights inside the building.
It was a bear, wasn't it?
It stayed on the dark side of the shadow, so it was hard to kind of make out.
And just for anyone that wants to follow at home, just Google bear walks upright.
Bob Bobsworth described the creature's head as having a taper to it like a robin. Then it very slowly turned away, walking down a catwalk that was inside the building, and Bobsworth heard the sound of wings as it sort of glided into the air. Newspapers and magazines in the area started to cover the UFO sightings and Mothman sightings at length. There are too many Mothman sightings to cover them all. Some came in as reports of large birds, others with more detail, but the media attention went wild, and people kept flocking to the area to try to have their own experiences with the creature.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. If you heard 3 towns over that all of this activity was starting to happen, would you go to the town?
I mean, you drag me there.
but say you were in high school.
Well, I didn't know you in high school.
Yeah, but would you go? Maybe that's how we met.
Maybe.
We were in the TNT area. No, you weren't into that?
Not really.
Would you think it was all just fake?
Yes.
There's also a haunting report of the creature running alongside a car, keeping pace with the passenger window as it drove through the TNT area. Eventually, it jumped on the hood of the car, stared at the teenagers inside, and then started towards the factory building.
Of course they're teenagers.
Eventually making its way to the roof, where it started to throw coal off the roof towards the car. And the witness in the documentary sort of describes this as it's almost like shooing them to go away. It's go, just trying to get them to go away.
Why is there coal on the roof?
It's a factory. Finally, the creature spread its wings and flew away. And often the interesting thing is people report this again and again, that it doesn't need to flap, to get it to be in air. It just sort of spreads its wings and then glides up. There's no flapping kind of that happens.
Yep.
The reports are mingled. Sometimes the creature is on foot, sometimes in flight. Various reports describe it as a Batman, a Birdman, a large bird, a monster. Many describe the flight pattern as similar to a helicopter.
Say it again. Instead of Batman, say man-bat.
No.
There's a big difference.
People describe it as Batman.
As Batman.
In the documentary. As the hysteria picks up, so do sightings and theories. One of the initial witnesses, Linda Scarberry, will claim to see the creature 18 times after her first sighting. And Linda, if you recall, is in that kind of 57 Chevy at the beginning.
God, I was like, why do I know that name?
Some locals think the creature is trying to communicate with them. Some sense a sadness from it. Locals start to draw conclusions that the creature was extraterrestrial or supernatural, not simply like a cryptid.
Well, this reminds me of that woman who had the quote-unquote special connection with the gorilla. I think this is the Rotterdam Zoo.
I don't know this one.
So she claimed to be able to feel a very special connection, could feel his emotions and everything, and would just constantly sit and make eye contact with this gorilla.
Okay.
Like, would visit the gorilla all the time. The gorilla would stare right back at her.
That's sweet.
And everyone is like, you really shouldn't be staring at a gorilla. It's a sign of aggression. She's like, no, I feel a connection to this animal. And then, of course, the gorilla one day just has had enough, breaks through the enclosure and just like beats the crap out of her, like chews her face.
Does it kill her?
Doesn't kill her. She survives the ordeal, but this was getting mauled by a 400-pound gorilla.
Jesus, that's terrifying. I mean, yeah, but like serves her right.
But
but also the zookeepers, you would think, need to be like, hey, lady, that's not good.
They did many times, but that's why they also introduced gorilla glasses.
What are gorilla glasses?
You don't know gorilla glasses?
No.
So
I know gorilla glue.
No, this is very different. Gorilla glasses are a crafty little invention that you wear them.
Like sunglasses?
Yeah, you wear them like sunglasses, and it makes your eye line look different. Mm-hmm. So you can stare right at the gorilla, but it makes you look like you're not. So you're not making eye contact. It's impossible to make direct eye contact while wearing gorilla glasses.
But if you wear sunglasses, it sort of is the same outcome, right? Because it just hides your eye line altogether.
I mean, I don't know gorilla law, but
I thought you knew all law.
But this is really smart. I'm going to send you a picture of a guy wearing gorilla glasses. So yeah, so you have the picture now, and while wearing them, again, it's impossible to make direct eye contact.
Oh my God, that's so silly. It's just like eyes like going like in the other direction. It's so silly. But
that stops gorillas from getting super spooked and aggressive.
There you go. Who knew?
All this to say is people anthropomorphize animals all the time, falsely.
Sure. Other locals believed it was a demon or the devil itself.
Case closed.
When you listen to the first-hand accounts of witnesses, you can hear the conviction in their voices. They truly believe, even 50 years later, in what they saw. To your point earlier, Alan, most sightings did happen at night, but several witnesses saw the creature in the middle of the day. Broad daylight. Just out in the open.
Although he was, during the day, he's much smaller and much more magpie-shaped.
Day or night, everyone confirms the red glowing eyes. One witness even developed a condition after her sighting, which made her own eyes red and itchy.
So she's allergic to the Mothman?
Yeah. He put a curse on her.
Wow.
So if you remember from the film, John Keel is sort of the character, is the character that Richard Gere is based on.
Oh, okay.
John Keel was an author from New York City who came to the area to investigate. He joined forces with the local reporter, Mary Heyer, which is similar to the movie again, except he joins forces with the local sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
John Keel interviews everybody, right? He's taking copious notes and records. He wanted to get to the bottom of it, to sort of debunk this and to figure out what was going on in Point Pleasant. But when he comes to town, things kind of start to escalate. In December of 1966, 5 pilots from the Dulles airport claimed to see the huge bird-like man creature flying around the tarmac. They initially thought it was a plane. So now it's just like, everywhere you turn, left and right, we got sightings.
Okay, the sightings is happening by an air traffic control tower.
Yeah. They think it's like these 5 people who are working at the airport. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, it's a plane. It's 5 people who corroborate, right? No, it's not. It's this bird-like man creature flying. 5 people who are experts in aircraft,
Interesting.
So John Keel starts to have his own personal experiences in the area. So him and Mary, right, They're very important to this story. Spend a lot of time investigating, but also going out to the TNT area. Like, you can look up his notes now to this day, and there's like versions online that you can read. They're really kind of very similar to the plot of the film, diving into this. And I would also recommend, as an initial step, if you want to read his book, or I listened to the audiobook version of the Mothman Prophecies. Again, the book that he writes is not fictional. It's based on his experiences and research.
Sure.
The movie is fictional. So they have the same title, but they're very sort of different source materials.
Got it.
So John Keel, as he's here, starts to feel like he's being followed. Like his phone is being tapped, like his mail is being tampered with or intercepted, right? He starts to get...
This is how he feels.
Yeah, he starts to get paranoid. He starts to believe this.
Sure.
He believes that all this stuff is happening.
He's drinking the Kool-Aid.
Which is represented in the film when he's listening to with Indrid Cold, right? He's get all these calls. He hears like wiretapping and things going on in the film. That's based on what he believed happened.
So yeah, as long as we're talking about that scene.
Sure.
I thought one of the most interesting twists of that entire movie was when Richard Gere's character recorded that conversation, and then the next day that recording actually existed. I could have sworn that the tape was going to be blank or something, but then no, they recorded it. It sounded just like weird voice on the other end.
Yep, terrifying.
So he in the film he recorded something. There's some kind of physical interaction that wasn't all just a hallucination.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where the story is going to take another non-linear turn, and we're going to start talking about the Men in Black.
The movie? Starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones?
No.
Because that's a great movie.
What that movie is based on.
What that movie is based on.
Correct. And there is an entire very deep dive Last Podcast on the Left series on the Men in Black, which I will defer all of you guys to go. I defer to the boys at Last Podcast on the Left wholly when we're covering this topic specifically. But you literally cannot talk about the Mothman and Men in Black without talking about the other. So we're only going to touch on the Men in Black as they relate to this case and as it relates to the Mothman. But again, this is like a rabbit hole of like you could spend years on it.
Okay.
The most basic definition of Men in Black: men dressed in black suits that come to harass or sternly encourage UFO witnesses to remain silent about what they have seen.
Galaxy Defenders.
This freaks me. I'm not going to lie. This really gets to me in a way. In the UFO community, they are believed to work for parts of the government or agencies designed to protect secrets about UFOs, cryptids, or other unexplainable secrets. That being said, there's a very often in these reportings of what happened, of these incidents, people describe, it's like a running joke in sci-fi movies. The movie we just watched for the Blob episode, I Married a Monster from Outer Space.
Yeah, that movie sucked.
Yeah, but you have, right, in that a character which is an alien pretending to be a human.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. That kind of like trope, right? Mm-hmm. Alien. That's how this is. It's like the Men in Black don't know how to open doors, don't know how to read. They stutter. They don't really know what they're saying. Like they'll say, "Hi, I'm from Chicago. I'm here to tell you about," and then they'll ask, "Where are you from in Chicago?" They won't know where Chicago is on a map. It's almost like they have a script of what to say. And anything beyond that, they're totally useless.
No. The Men in Black are the agency that stops those people because they're not blending in right.
No, I'm talking about the real life version of this here.
Did you ever watch the cartoon?
No.
That was a great show.
No, I didn't know there was a cartoon. So they can't speak very well. They can't read. Like there's accounts of like some of them staying like all night at somebody's house and just totally unable to communicate in a human normal way. And there's a lot of accounts of this.
I mean, this also applies to, toddlers.
Yeah. So some claim, right, that they're totally extraterrestrial, that even to the point of not having bones or understanding basic human behavior.
So that's how you vet them. Excuse me, sir, do you have bones?
They're like their fingers are often described as very strange and like
boneless.
Yeah. But they're quintessentially like the total opposite of Mulder, if you will, right? Not out there to want to believe in UFOs. They are out there, whether they are extraterrestrial or they're some sort of government thing.
So
they're out there to shut it down. Most claim that the Men in Black cause a type of psychological trauma on witnesses. Now, Alan.
With a billy club.
Do you remember at the beginning of the film?
Of Men in Black?
Of Mothman Prophecies.
Oh, we're back to this.
When John Keel goes to the door of the couple, right? And he knocks on the door. His car breaks down. He knocks on the door. And he's met with a gun in his face. And the guy keeps him in the bathroom. And he's like, you've come here 3 nights in a row.
Yeah.
This is based on the Men in Black experiences that happen at this time in this area.
Got it. Because, yeah, Richard Gere didn't remember shit.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, I wasn't here. But then he had all that missing time.
But that's actually based on a real interaction that John Keel had. And he talks about it in the book about like how, you know, he came to like he actually uses it to demonstrate what you were just saying, like how people project their own sort of, you know, if you see something, they project their own thing on it. So like in this story, John Keel, he talks a lot about how he was wearing a suit. He's from New York City. He's coming to this town to investigate. It's the night he gets there. He's wearing a suit. It's the middle of the night. He has a beard, which I guess is uncommon for the area, which I didn't realize.
A beard?
Yeah, that's what he says in his book. But it's middle of the night. He has a black sedan, right? He looks like a government, you know, he's a reporter at a big New York, you know, paper. Like he looks like that.
He was wearing a beard, or he had a beard with him?
He has a beard on his face. So in this rural town of West Virginia, right? Like this couple in the middle of the night, this guy comes to the door. They thought he was really weird and freaky.
Because he's bearded.
Yeah, because he's different, right? He's wearing a suit. He's in the middle of the night. Like it's weird. And if you have the context of like these Men in Black sightings or whatever, like of course it feels weird about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna take another leap here. We're leveling up one more time. The next step of this very, very complicated story. Tulpas.
Tulpas?
Have you heard of tulpas?
Tulpas?
Yeah.
No.
Tulpas are a spiritual or occult or mystical apparition that are believed to be created by belief or mental powers. It has roots in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, especially the idea of a thought form. Loosely
Whoa. One more time, please. Just recap it for me.
Well, I'm going to give you a definition here. Ready?
Okay, because you piqued my interest here.
Loosely defined by occultist William Walker Atkinson as, quote, simple ethereal objects emanating from the auras surrounding people, generating from their thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Some believe that these forms always exist around us. They are always there like radio waves. And when certain conditions align, there is a breakdown in the system, and certain people can see these figures. John Keel likens it to how some people can see or feel spirits like mediums and others cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Some have the ability to see something that other people can't, but it doesn't mean it's not always there. So the Tibetans believed that very advanced people could actually access and manipulate these figures into tulpas, bringing them into the vision and reality of people who would not usually be able to see them. John Keel speculates that some UFO sightings may actually be tulpas. How this relates to the Mothman case? Well, with the rise of eyewitness reports of the creature, so came the rise in reports of Men in Black encounters in the area. There were even reports of the Men in Black trying to abduct witnesses and pull them into their black sedan. As all of this is going on, sightings of UFOs and the Mothmans rise into the hundreds. Throughout the next spring, sightings of UFOs and the Mothman seem to merge. People seeing the Mothman flying or merging with a UFO, like literally, like seeing them in the same moment, before finally tapering off through the spring and summer. Keel argues in his book that UFO sightings have been part of the Earth's history since the dawn of mankind, that even the Bible includes mentions of strange movements in the sky. He believes that these beings have probably been here long before humans were, and that quote-unquote strange or unexplainable events are actually part of the blueprint of our planet. He also claims that once there's a belief established, and this is what we're talking about here with tulpas, once there's a belief established, the paranormal will shift to meet your belief, meaning that once belief in the Mothman or UFO sightings took hold in Point Pleasant, the actual sightings themselves shifted to meet the beliefs of the community.
Here's what I have to say about all that.
Yes.
I was recently on a film shoot, and where I was speaking with a certain individual
Cryptic.
that was very into DMT.
What's DMT?
DMT is a psychedelic drug.
Okay.
It's very potent.
It's like ayahuasca?
Maybe.
Okay.
I mean,
You're no expert?
No, I'm no expert.
Okay.
However, we talked about this at length.
Okay.
And he just gave me like the whole.
Is this a famous person?
I don't want to give any details.
Oh, okay, fine.
Because we're talking technically about illicit activity.
Okay, sure. Tell me off air.
And they use it maybe like, once every other month, once every few months, something like that.
Okay.
And what it basically does is like, so like a normal hallucinogen, we're going to use like mushrooms or acid as an example.
Okay.
That's something where it completely changes your sensory input and like things seem really different and weird and you have new thoughts and all sorts of stuff. DMT is like being thrown into a dream where
sounds scary.
where the whole thing can last about 6 minutes.
Oh, fast.
But it can feel like eons have gone by. But it's literally you're transported to like it's like you're in a dream.
You're not literally, but that's how it feels.
That's yes. I mean, I guess so. Because this is all secondhand knowledge here. But it's literally like you are just transported somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the way that this was explained to me, this person always uses it with an intention. This person is very into meditation, all sorts of spiritualism. Mm-hmm. They go in with an intention because whenever they're there, they usually encounter, for lack of a better term, these entities. And the appearance always changes, but there's something that makes them immediately recognizable.
Can you break that down for me?
So, like, they don't always look the same, but there's something about their physical appearance that immediately makes them recognizable as, okay, these are the entities.
Okay.
All right. These entities are, in his understanding, beings, real beings.
Okay, so he believes that they're not a dream, that he's accessing
Yes.
some sort of other plane.
They are, yes, accessing other planes.
Okay.
And they are just they're just beings on a different, I hate saying a being of a different dimension. These are multi-dimensional beings. So like, as we understand everything, we're three-dimensional beings, right?
Yep.
I forget the physicist because he was just really dropping a whole lot of science at me quick.
I'm sure he was.
And everything was like so well sourced when he was talking about this. I was very impressed. But there's like 18 dimensions or something. And like, I'm like, okay, I know the fourth is time, right? Yeah. I don't know what the hell the others are, but there's a lot of them. And he was telling me about the scientist that
Einstein.
Not Einstein, but not only did they write out like this published theorem on all 18 dimensions, I hope I have that number right, but proved it mathematically.
Oh, interesting.
And that's like, oh, and like it's, I want to say accepted by the scientific community, but I don't know if we're that far. Anyways, there's a lot of science and math that back all this up.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So anyways, he would encounter these entities and go in with an intention, and then would basically be shown a purposeful dream that would answer the intention.
This intention that he specifically set.
Yes.
So his intention might be like, I want help with X, or I need to think through X.
Yep.
And then he would take DMT, and his vision and he believes it was kind of like more of his opening up of the mind to access other dimensions, would resolve that question that he put into the universe, or address it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
So, because of a higher number of dimensions, again, I only know the fourth of time. You get to see the future. I don't fucking know.
Right.
Anyways, he would just get some kind of feedback and it would usually give him some kind of clarity.
Is DMT man-made, or is it some kind of
it's natural? It's naturally occurring. It's from a plant.
Makes me feel like I believe it more.
The only time where he wouldn't get like some kind of meaningful response from these entities would be if he goes in with a weak intention, where the way he described it was he'd basically go before these, you know, all-knowing beings and ask a stupid question, and they just wouldn't even bother, you know.
What would be a stupid question versus a meaningful question?
Again, I don't want to get into specifics,
right?
Because I want to protect this person's anonymity. Relating back to the Mothman, so people kept getting these prophecies, right? And it was foretellings of the future, sorta. But they didn't, were they? Yeah, they were about the future, but it wasn't about controlling the future. It was just like, yeah, this happens because like you are a smaller dimensioned creature. And what do they explain in the movie? How the window washer, who's up there, can see a little bit further. Doesn't mean he's, you know, smarter or more wise or anything. He just has a different perspective, and he's sharing the perspective because why not? You know.
Yeah, I like in the film too when Richard Gere is visiting like the expert guy, and he's like, why can't they tell me like who they are like this? Why can't this Mothman creature like explain what he is? And the guy goes, have you ever explained yourself to a cockroach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was so cool. Because it's just like
the level of intellect, you know, the level of intellect is so different between the two people or the two beings that it's hard to communicate.
So just circling back, when I was talking to this guy, you know, it at first, you know, for most of this, it's just like, okay, this is just you tripping, and this is how you experience this chemical, right? I'm butchering the specifics here, but he encountered this artist's work, and immediately in the depictions that this artist would do, he recognized the entities.
Jesus.
And so he tracked down the artist, and he's like, this is so, I love your work. What's your, what is it? What's your inspiration? He's like, I do a lot of DMT. And when I take DMT, this is who I see.
What?
And like, I got chills as soon as he said that.
I will admit this. Something about this topic, and I've experienced this a few times in my life, when I went through exploring the Men in Black through the last podcast on the left or with different research, every time I watch the Mothman, there's something about this topic, and I know this may sound like weak coming from me, but there's something about this topic that hits me differently. And even 2 nights ago when I was finishing up some of this research, it was late, I was by myself, it was, you know, like whatever time, midnight. And it's like this, it's not even like a fear necessarily, but it hits me in like a really deep, weird way, this topic, where there's something about it that I'm like, it's not even that I believe it or not. It's just something about it when I get into the research of it that is very impacting on me. You know, I freaked myself out, but not in like a normal, I'm scared of this way, in a different way, in a way of like, I don't know. And I'm not saying that I believe that this is a thing or not, but there is something about this that I guess I probably subconsciously buy into a little bit, or I'm intrigued by or something.
I just think that there's so much, not science. Science is the wrong word, but actually, no, maybe it's the right word. It feels like there's so much science to this, where it's not just, you know, some people thinking that they saw the Loch Ness Monster. There's enough overlap from vastly different walks of people that there's something going on. As soon as this was explained to me, and then I watched about, you know, this guy's experience with DMT, and then
you immediately went and got some.
Well, no, so I watched the Mothman Prophecies shortly afterwards, and it just all like clicked.
Yeah,
and I'm like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
The idea is that this guy, the guy you met on set or whatever, told you. The idea is that he takes this to sort of access what already exists. Mm-hmm. Right. So similar to John Keel's, and the way he explained it as radio waves, like something that's always there. Mm-hmm. But we just don't notice radio waves, right? Because we don't have the senses we need to know that they're there. Mm-hmm. But we know that they're there. And so similar to, that's what John Keel is saying, that these beings, these entities, this shit exists. It's just like whether or not you have the right facilities to understand that. So your friend, the way it connects, what I'm seeing is that your friend, this guy you met, is saying that these entities that he experiences on DMT, he believes are always there. And they're sort of like this other plane that he just doesn't have access to unless he takes this drug. Okay. I just wanted to kind of recap the connection between those.
Yeah. And so like this opens up the whole can of worms of like what you were saying is, you know, you have mediums, you have shamans, you have all these people that are just, are we just using different terminology for doing the same thing?
This is the first time I think ever that I've seen you this bought into something like this.
Because this was explained to me, not in a, wow, this like super weird thing happened to me, I don't know what happened, but just like, no, this is like what I believe, this is what I feel. I'm not trying to say anything exists or doesn't exist. This is just my experience with it.
Did he show you the art?
No.
That would be really cool to see.
But the last thing I want to say, just because this reminds me very much of the way that Lovecraft describes higher dimensional beings. So like all the eldritch beasts and whatnot, humanity views them as like dark, malicious gods, but they don't, but you know, they're not, they don't even really acknowledge humanity.
Right.
It's like, you know, the way you don't acknowledge the cockroaches, you know?
Oh, you acknowledge that. They meet the nuzzle of my vacuum real fast.
Sure. But a beautiful analogy for just like why people are supposed to go crazy when they view these higher dimensional beings. So picture like a 2D person, right? So like on a piece of paper.
Sure. Like a stick figure.
Picture Mario, right? And so you're
Mario.
Yeah, you're in like a 2D world, you know? And now picture a 3-dimensional thing, like a snake, weaving back and forth through the plane. Through
the 2D Mario Game Boy screen?
Right, because you have the vantage point of a third dimension. Mario doesn't. What would Mario see? He would see just like these bits and pieces as it intersects his plane in impossible ways. It would be impossible to connect the dots from your perspective. But from the higher perspective, that makes perfect sense.
Wow, you just blew my mind. Did you just come up with that?
This has been explained to me, not with Mario, but this has been explained to me in the past.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so like when I was, watching Mothman Prophecies, and they're talking about predicting the future, and the guy that like lost everything and like threw in the towel, whatever his character was.
Bill Patton, his character.
Yep. Where he's like, it doesn't matter. Like all these things that they're predicting for you don't actually matter. It's just, these are just facts, you know? And like, that's how I kind of looked at it, where it's like, yeah, they're telling you like the news. They're just telling you stuff because from their one perspective, that makes sense to tell you in that moment. They're not, but from your very limited perspective, what that information is coming through drastically differently.
And it also causes this obsession because you want so badly to understand it and you never can. You know, you can't in the way that's...
It's like when Bill Patton said, or when he was questioned about like, well, don't you want to know about these things? And he says, well, we're not allowed to know.
It reminds me of Gunslinger, and I don't want to give anything away, but in the first book, in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, there is this like plot point that really freaked me out. Like it was a very successful plot point, but without giving too much away, it was the idea of having too much information about the future and what that does to somebody.
Sure.
You know, like if you knew, Alan, what was going to happen to you for every single day for the rest of your life, that would really change the way you live. And it would like make you go totally crazy. If you knew that at 35, this would happen, at 40, this would happen, at 50, this would happen, like you would go crazy with that information. You absolutely would. So
just look at Doc Brown.
Exactly. So, you know, I don't know. There is some like headiness to it for sure. And like some sadness to it, you know, like life is also sadness in a way.
I mean, it's all about not exceeding intended bounds.
Right.
Right?
Right. Let's all make a pact right now. Stay in our lanes.
With the devil.
Woo! All right. So back to the Mothman here. Back to good old Point Pleasant.
Here we go.
After this sort of rage, right, this hysteria rises for a very long time. And there's tons of sightings, hundreds of UFO sightings, Mothman sightings, Men in Black, all this stuff is happening at the same time. There's sort of a period of quiet where there's like several months where things really died down. We actually get to fall of 1967, the following year. So a year after this started. So in November, there's another sighting sort of out of the blue, right? By 2 hunters in the TNT area. Reporter Mary Heyer, who was John Keel's partner in crime, highlights fresh sightings in her column. Because she has like a recurring column where she covers specifically sightings, weird things that happen.
Sure.
After this, there's an explosion of activity again, which brings us to December of 1967, where things are about, I'm going to warn you, things are shift a little bit away from paranormal and shift a little bit sad.
Uh-oh.
Of all the cryptid sightings and unexplainable incidents across modern history, what happens next is not only devastating, but truly sets this story apart from others. For over a year, the town of Point Pleasant has endured the fear and anxiety of nonstop monster sightings, UFO sightings, Flatwood monsters, Men in Black, and injured cult sightings. And again, believe what you want about tulpas, whether there's sort of some kind of collective energy this town is creating that these paranormal entities are morphing into, that if there's some sort of thinning of the veil, if there, believe what you want about the tulpas and the thought projections and the reasons why this might be happening. Either way, that's the climate of this town, right? The media coverage has been a frenzy, and it all seems to culminate with the Silver Bridge collapse and the loss of 46 lives and 9 injuries.
46? Not 36.
Correct. For some reason, they changed that in the movie. I put 36, just I thought they would have based it on that, and then in the research, I was like, oh, it was actually 10 more.
Interesting.
The Silver Bridge connected West Virginia to Ohio. The bridge was 40 years old. 10 days before Christmas, due to a traffic light malfunction in downtown, the bridge was backed up with cars and semi-trucks. Gridlocked traffic caused the Silver Bridge collapse on a Friday around 5 p.m. Witnesses to the collapse always point out that Christmas gifts ended up floating in the river alongside the cars.
That's really sad.
Mm-hmm. The collapse was fast. The cables broke one by one, causing the bridge to swing back and forth. Cars were thrown from it, and within seconds, the bridge collapsed on top of the cars and into the river. It was a devastating incident that claimed almost 50 lives in mere seconds. For years, the ramp to the bridge remained, leading to nothing, but serving as a reminder of the tragedy that took place. After the collapse, some legends emerged that the Mothman had been seen perched on the bridge that night, but locals deny this. They say that after this horrible event, no one wanted to hear about the Mothman anymore, that it wasn't as important as what just happened, right?
Sure.
Some residents claimed to see strange lights in the sky the following days, but there was no more Mothman sightings. New York reporter John Keel leaves Point Pleasant. Mary Heyer continues to report on strange events in the area in her column, Where the Waters Mingle, which again is based on the Native American folklore that,
Yeah. So was he present at was he part of the bridge incident, or was that just a movie liberty?
I'm not sure. I think he was in Point Pleasant. I don't know if he was there or not.
But he didn't save the woman out of the water.
No. I mean, no.
Okay. I mean, I
They also claim to have had like a strictly platonic relationship, as opposed to how it's portrayed in the film.
I mean, it's Richard Gere. Come on. How can you say no?
And Laura Linney.
Good luck having a platonic relationship with that.
With that. So Mary Heyer, sadly, after suffering from illness for over a month, totally unrelated, just in the future, passes away. Mary Heyer's column had kept the reports of cryptids and sightings of all kinds alive for so long, and in the forefront, right, of the town's media attention. And so there is something to be said about that, right? Mary Heyer's column could have stoked the flames of this in a way.
Sure.
She was constantly reporting on these sightings and what was going on. And we all know people kind of, once you have that in your mind, you might be more apt to see something, which again, tulpa or not.
That's the name of your new podcast. Tulpa or nah?
After her passing, things grow quiet on the paranormal front in Point Pleasant for a long time. 5 years later, John Keel releases his book, The Mothman Prophecies. Locals say that John Keel was the driving force, really, that turned the Mothman and Point Pleasant into this global fascination, right? He, being this New York City reporter who had this clout, he's really kind of the thing that skyrocketed this into the level of sort of fame that it has. To this day, there are still occasional sightings of the Mothman around the TNT area and Point Pleasant proper. The connection we see in the film version of the Mothman Prophecies is that the creature is actually a herald in some ways. And there are rumors that he's been spotted around the world just as major disasters are about to strike. Right? So he, in the film, if you haven't seen it, and we're going to talk about the film in a minute, but what he's trying to do is warn people. He does it in a terrifying way. But what he's trying to do is sort of, in a way, warn about what's going to happen. That all of these people are going to die, that there's this major disaster. And that's why it's the Mothman Prophecies. There are some reports that when you look at like global disasters, like earthquakes, things around the world, you have sort of similar reports leading up to those major disasters. Again, that's based on what I read in his book. You know, that's not
right.
You know, that's not backed by any major
that has not been peer reviewed.
Correct. Point Pleasant now celebrates this part of its history with a local museum, an annual event, and sculptures in the town dedicated to the Mothman. And of course, the film only helped to perpetuate this part of the town's history.
Sure.
In his book, John Keel shares an experience Mary Hyre had with the Men in Black. Not long after the bridge had collapsed, two short men, and, you know, in their fancy suits, she describes them as possibly being twins, walked into her office at the newspaper. They asked her about the rise in UFO sightings in the area, and John Keel claims that Mary was taken aback. The focus had been, you know, everything lately had been about the bridge. This was like not long after the bridge collapsed. And so to have somebody come in and ask about it seemed like tasteless and kind of weird, right? The men reportedly asked Mary if anyone had asked her to stop writing about the sightings. And she said no. And then they asked her what she would do if someone told her to stop writing about them. And she said, I would tell them to go to hell.
Oh.
Later the same day, another different man in a suit approached Mary, came into her office. She noted that his hands seemed unusual, very long fingers, and his suit looked kind of like out of fashion, outdated, like from a different era.
He's dressed as a samurai.
It was a suit, but it just wasn't kind of like the latest. He also wasn't wearing like a coat, even though it was winter and it was freezing outside. He was just wearing like the suit jacket, not like a winter coat.
He also had a thorax.
What's a thorax? From Dr. Seuss?
That's the thorax. The thorax is a part of an insect. Oh, interesting. Apparently humans have a thorax too. The thorax is just like the middle part. Picture an ant. You have the head on top, the thorax in the middle, and the abdomen as the bottom. You know, ants are 3 parts.
The bottom is the abdomen?
Yes.
It's not the butt?
I mean, it is the butt, but it's on an insect, it's called an abdomen.
My abdomen and my butt are on different
planes.
Different dimensions. Okay, so back to the story. So the second guy comes in to see Mary later the day.
Yeah.
He announces himself as Jack Brown, and he says he's a UFO researcher. They talk for a little bit. It's kind of awkward. And then he asks her what she would do if someone asked her to stop writing about UFOs. Mary asked if he was with the other 2 men that had come in earlier, and the man said no, that he was alone. He said that he was a friend of Gray Barker, who was like a really well-known UFO investigator from West Virginia.
Okay.
And so Mary asked if he knew John Keel, who's, our friend John Keel. And the man said that since Keel started to publish his own sightings and experiences, that he was no longer a friend. He called Keel a liar. And of course, Mary was like, he's not a liar. I was there when we saw these lights in the skies and we've had these experiences. I was with him. So he's not a liar. I believe him. I was there. The man asked Mary to kind of take her out to where she and Keel had seen the UFOs. And she was like, no, like I can't spend my day kind of taking you around town. Like that's where it is. You can go do it. He asked if Keel was in town, and Mary said no, like kind of like dismissive, right? So this happens. And then there's all of these reports that John Keel goes over in his book of more people coming to Mary, more men in black, asking what she would do if they asked her, if people asked her to stop writing about it. And then going to her friends, going to other people in the community. All of these people are having these experiences of these men in suits, these awkward men who like can't have normal conversations. Something's really off about them. And they all end up asking, what would Mary Hyard do if somebody asked her to stop writing about this?
This sounds so much like a government agency. Tons of redundancy, zero efficiency.
Yes, and weirdly weird,
and
outdated suits.
A lot of manpower.
So, the men in black have been reported around the country, usually tied to UFO sightings. They often arrive in strange old cars from like eras that, you know, are no like coming in the car from the 80s or the 20s or something, you know?
Sure.
And they seem to have something different. Everyone says there's something off about them. They are much bigger than this story, but they are an integral part of it.
Mm-hmm.
All in all, there were hundreds of sightings over 1966 and 1967 of the Mothman in Point Pleasant, not to mention the other occurrences and incidents at the time. Regardless of if you believe that this was mass hysteria or a supernatural event, I think we've all sort of abandoned the bird theory. There is something to be said about the sheer number of unique witnesses and the community that has endured so much for so long. Throughout this research, one thing has been very apparent, that the people of Point Pleasant are truly a community, a resilient group that honors the tragedy of the Silver Bridge collapse and celebrates every aspect of their history with the paranormal and the unexplainable.
I think it was a very elaborate hoax by a mutant owl with a telephone and a crystal ball.
No, you don't. Tell me what you really believe. Be honest.
No, I've made my views clear.
You think it was Tulpas?
I that is my, I don't know. I think that's my favorite theory, though. I mean, this is, I mean, we're just really just diving into like science fiction here.
Yeah.
But there's lots of accounts, and I'm actually drawing a huge blank on any other specific ones, but about how when there's a huge tragedy, there's always like this psychic energy that bubbles through beforehand, or, you know,
yeah,
like thins the veil.
Mm-hmm.
And if like there is any other plane of existence,
mm-hmm,
you know, why couldn't a thin veil make them bleed into each other?
Yeah. There is, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but in very early days.
The man with the axe.
No. There is this subreddit called Three Kings, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's geared towards these, like, what I call midnight rituals. But, like, there are things like Bloody Mary, Three Kings, like different kind of, like, step-by-step rituals. The elevator game.
Yeah,
you have to do
stupid.
this. No, listen. You have to do this thing exactly, right? All of these steps need to be perfectly followed, and then this is the outcome. And then people comment below their experiences. And it's, you know, it's kind of creepypasta meets pop culture meets whatever.
Wait until midnight, set up the chairs, light the candles, take some DMT, and then spin 3 times. It works every time.
But there's one, and I forget the exact name of it, but it's called something like Spirit Guide. Like, it's not like an evil thing like Bloody Mary or the elevator game,
Mm-hmm.
which, and all of these are really about accessing different dimensions. That's what they're about.
Yeah.
It's not about even like ghosts or paranormal. It's like,
Right.
You do this and you can access another dimension. Now, do I think if you go into an elevator and you press all these buttons, you know, to me, I don't think that's the key. But there's something very creepy about them because of that. Because, like, I think different dimensions feel more possible than other things, right? And so there's this one that was like accessing your spirit guide or something like that. And, you know, it's a silly ritual where you have to kind of like cover the lights and, you know, do this and do that. But
It takes a while.
but the end result is that this like guide comes to you. And it's very similar to what you were explaining about the DMT.
Yeah.
Where this guide comes to you where they might look kind of human, they might not. And you can ask them like one question. You know, all of that seems a little fictionalized, but it's the same idea. It's like you can approach them with this question and they will help you with this one thing. And you can, once you have to kind of do some stuff to like win them over. And then once you do, you can access them like in a respectable amount of time. You know, you can't like use them every day, but you can access them as needed for like a lifetime. And there's just something about that always kind of stuck with me, you know?
I'm gonna butcher this, but this is reminding me of description of contacting higher beings. That's just somebody wrote up probably on Reddit.
Yeah.
And so we're going to use the example of you're the higher being and there's some ants, right? So just imagine all of a sudden ants that, you know, you've never taken notice of them before. All of a sudden they're saying your name, right? You're going to take a look at them, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, what? And then, you know, what do they want? They say like, these other ants, they're just so evil. We want you to destroy them. And you're like, okay. And so you step on, and you know, you step on the ants. He says, this ant doesn't love me. And so you just step on all the other ants. So you're the only two left. Like, why not? They're ants and they're saying your name. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of power that you have.
Is it? You're just going about.
If you're an ant, then it's a lot of power that they're putting in you.
Right. From the ant's perspective, sure. But from yours, you're just moving your foot a little bit.
I know, but I'm saying that's like the balance. That's like the whole crux of all of this is that things, you know, as you sort of escalate and whether or not, I don't know, it's like a higher dimensional scale or whatever it is, or a scale of intellect or whatever, the power does shift, right? So if you do have some sort of superior beings to us, like, that's why, like, why would they give a shit if your friend asks them about, like, oh man, even if it's a really meaningful question, even if it's like, I really want to bring peace to Afghanistan, why would they give a shit? Like, why would you, if the ants came to you and they said, we really want to bring peace to this colony, what would you, like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, because right now we're trying to put human motivations onto a non-human being, right? And so this comes back to the Mario example. It's all about perspective. Like, the information that they give you makes sense from one perspective. Maybe it's going to be super confusing or give the completely wrong perception from the earthly plane. But again, maybe it's just interest, curiosity. They say in the Mothman Prophecies how the only reason why the Mothman or whatever is noticing them at all is because you noticed him in the first place, and they just acknowledge that.
right.
It's just because we're trying to put human beliefs onto an unknowable being.
Yeah. And we'll go crazy if we try too hard.
Yep.
Well, okay. On that note, let's talk about some pop culture. We've talked about the movie a lot, so I don't think we need to do like a deep dive into it.
No, that's for Horror Movie Club.
But I'm just going to give some basics. In 2002, John Keel's book was turned into a fictionalized major motion picture, starring Richard Gere, Deborah Messing, Laura Linney, and Will Patton.
You don't say.
Directed by Mark Pellington. The film was met with extremely divided reviews.
Yeah, it was so confusing.
Some thought it was a mishmash of paranormal storytelling, and others praise it as the most realistic display of demonology in cinema.
Bam, got him.
I love it.
Yep.
It was terrifying to me, even when I was younger and didn't truly understand. It's terrifying to me now as an adult when you do. I think either way, it's well done. And even now, like, having gone through this research and you see that they included Indrid Cold and the Men in Black. And, you know, it's not just like they told the story of Mothman sightings. They really, like, paid attention to John Keel's writings and turned it into something that I think works really well. And it's even more meaningful after you sort of dive deeply into some of these things. A fun little shout out. Remember the Flatwoods Monster, the one shaped like the spade from the playing cards?
Yes.
The Flatwoods Monster appears in these video games.
Oh.
Fallout 76.
Screw that game.
The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Okay.
Space Harrier 2. Amagon. Strikers 1945. and as an Easter egg in everybody's Golf 4.
Neat.
And of course, when we're talking about Men in Black, we have the summer blockbusters starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. The first film was released in 1997.
You just put your little notes down so proudly of yourself. Yeah, I mean, I think the first Men in Black was a really good example of like the type of mythos that the agency does. After that, it's just like fun stories now that you're in the world.
And the interesting thing is that in the Men in Black, right, though they are an agency, there is like there's aliens and things that work at the agency, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of similar to what we could be seeing here, because there's something about these beings, according to these reports. They're not just like scary government dudes. Mm-hmm. There's something about them that's otherworldly and not right. And so, you know, I don't know. That could be a whole nother thing. But like the Men in Black part to me is like the most eerie of the whole thing. It's like, okay, even if it is a tulpa, how do they interact here? Yeah. Or did they just come to this because there's all these sightings and they felt like they needed to control the situation that the tulpa had broke open?
Well,
you know,
clearly just because there's been so many visitations and so many of the same questions asked, the only reason they're going is because their stupid middle management boss tells them to.
Yeah.
You know, being the skeptic in most things, this I think is the most I want to believe topic that we've done so far.
Yay. Well, that's exciting. That feels like a milestone.
Sure. Because it broke a lot of skepticism is a huge integral part to believing this in the first place. It's not just like, and here are the facts and take it or leave it.
Yeah.
You know, it's these things, they feel supernatural because they're scientifically unknowable.
Right.
You know, we're dealing with multiple planes of existence that have correlations to mathematical equations.
Yeah.
For me, that adds the most credibility, as opposed to like this is an account of these certain mediums that can apparently contact the dead.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. I feel like there's something about this that just hits a little different, feels a little more, even though I'm a believer in paranormal and things like that, it feels a little heavier. I guess that's the right word that I've been looking for this whole episode. Something about this feels heavier. And the fact that this is like the only cryptid that I'm aware of that has this like this much intensity behind it, right? It's not just Mothman, it's not just Bigfoot, it's UFO sightings, it's the Men in Black, it's tulpas, it's this like whole thing is cracked open, and it ends with like this actual tragedy, right? This bridge collapse in this town where all of this shit has happened to for hundreds of years. In this town, 50 people died in seconds. Like this terrifying, awful, horrifying tragedy that is totally real. And, you know, and so there's something about it that is just like very heavy, the whole story itself, you know, and
sure.
And we should also, you know, hopefully we're being respectful of that too, in the lives that were lost in that. But I agree. There's something about it that feels more important maybe than other fun topics that we cover. Thank you guys. Listen, I know this one was meandering at times, but thank you guys so much for being here. I'm really excited by this, and we're really excited to talk to John C. Cook from Fido about this further for his sort of take on, so, you know, he's had some sightings and experiences, so it'll be fun to talk to him about that and end it on a higher note. But thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye. If you want to support the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast, consider joining our Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to bonus episodes, access to Lunatics Magazine, and all kinds of other fun perks. You can also support the show by picking up some of our really cool, fun new merch featuring gorgeous designs by Pilar Caperta. That's available on Teespring, and you can follow the link in the show notes to find that. And one of the most important things you can do to help small podcasts like us grow is to rate and review on Apple or anywhere else you listen to the Lunatics Radio Hour. Every review really does go such a long way. And of course, you can follow us at the Lunatics Project on Instagram. Thank you.